Hello and welcome to Try Talking Sport, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer or endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation and a little bit of entertainment. Well, how are you doing? I hope you're keeping safe and well and tipping along with your training and keeping your motivation in check. I have to admit, I had a couple of days there last week where the motivation to do anything was really on the floor. A few more of my events got cancelled. I couldn't face going on the laptop to get some of my to-do list done, and as for getting on my bike, well, it got a good rest over the past 2 weeks. But as I mentioned in the previous episode, I've signed up to the Galway Bay Swim Challenge of completing 13 kilometres of open water swimming over the course of the month of August, and I'm doing it in my swimming togs with no wetsuit. I went from 0 to hero in the first week, going from a few dips and splashes here and there to completing 7 kilometres in the first week in total, including my longest ever open water swim without a wetsuit of just over 2 kilometres on Sunday. Yippee! I have to say though, the thought of doing the swim to Foudra, as it's called, was way more daunting than actually doing it. We swam just over 1k out from the shore with a super encouraging group who made sure we all enjoyed the experience and were safe with our support kayak. I had swam a couple of 1 kilometre distances during the week, and as you do over breakfast on a Friday morning, someone said we should do a big swim on Sunday. I really didn't have too much time to talk myself out of it, if the truth be told. Although nervous on Saturday when I thought about the potential of maybe not being able to complete the distance, getting too cold in the water and the possibility of there being jellyfish, I have to say I was a little more than apprehensive. However, it was an excited nervous that set in on Sunday morning as we all got ready for the big dip. Swept away on a tide of excitement and encouragement by the gathered crowd, it was a great swim on a gloriously flat, calm morning in Galway Bay. And I really enjoyed it. So much so, Fiona of #PinkLadies and I have decided to increase our swim challenge distance to 26 kilometres for the month, so doubling the challenge. You may wonder why I'm telling you all of this. Well, firstly, I'm still buzzing from that swim, and I can't wait to get out to Foudra again in the coming weeks and see just how I get on again. Second of all, my motivation that was on the floor has suddenly soared, not just for training, but for getting some other bits and pieces done that really I have been avoiding doing. And finally to say, whilst many of the races that you have been planning to take part in for months have been cancelled or postponed, it's okay to take some time out to adjust to a new plan and find other ways to get those endorphin highs and find that finish line feeling. And if your motivation has been lacking, to also pick that up off the floor. If you don't have a new race plan just yet or not sure what you're going to do for the season 2020, why not pick a different goal and simply use your active lifestyle to embrace the adventure of life? Swim, cycle, run, climb, kayak, whatever it is. When you look back at this summer, what will you remember? Will it be the cancelled race you were so disappointed with, or will it be the adventure and challenge you embraced and the self-satisfaction and pride of what you achieved and made the most of this unprecedented situation and these peculiar times that we now live in? Speaking of setting a challenge and rising to it, that is exactly what Ronan McLaughlin did twice in almost as many weeks. Ronan, a former professional rider from Muff in Donegal, has spent more of his 33 years in the saddle than he has on his 2 feet. The former unpuffed chain reaction rider tackled the Everesting challenge with gusto early in July, setting the 5th fastest time worldwide for the challenge and setting a new Irish record for the 8,848 metres of climbing required to achieve the title in the process. A feat that shot him back into the spotlight in the world of cycling. Not one to rest on his laurels, there were murmurs after that first record that maybe there was more in the tank, that he could go faster and possibly set a new world record. He quietly went about his business in the intervening weeks, reviewing his performance, his bike, the route, and made some changes to seek out those marginal gains that would see him set a new Everesting World Record on July 30th in a time of 7 hours, 4 minutes and 41 seconds. Almost 23 minutes faster than Alberto Contador's time of 7:27:20, which was set just 3 weeks earlier. In this episode, we chat about that world record and about his life on 2 wheels, from the early days of cycling after school to his time as a professional rider. He has raced with some of the best riders in the world on the professional circuit, represented club, county and country on his bike for numerous years. Returning home after his professional career, he has taken the domestic scene by storm with many podiums and race wins to his name, including a double Shea Elliott win in 2018 and 2019. His plans for a 3 in a row were scuppered by COVID-19. He has also won the Donegal Ultra 555k twice and has set his sights on winning this year's race and breaking the course record in the process. Ronan is embedded in the world of cycling, not just by riding his bike, but across his now day job with the charity Sustrans, his own coaching business Panache, his work with Pactimo, as well as his advocacy roles as chairperson of Foyle CC and member of the board of Cycling Ireland. This is a great chat with an athlete who leaves no stone unturned in his race preparation and training, at all times seeking out the best performance from himself and his equipment with meticulous planning and number crunching. Passionate, dedicated and committed are just some of the words we can use to describe the man from Donegal who now sits at the top of the world. Enjoy the show. Ronan McLaughlin, thank you so much for joining me on Try Talking Sport, fresh from knocking Alberto Contador off his world champion title for the Everesting Challenge. Well done and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show again. I'm not sure if I would say I'm fresh from having broken the record, but I'm certainly, I suppose I'm recovering now at this stage, but it definitely still hasn't sunk in.
Tell us a little bit about this Everesting record. We will chat a little bit about your background in sport because you do have a prolific sporting CV in cycling, both here and abroad. But I really want to talk about the Everesting Challenge for the moment, for the first couple of minutes of the show, to give people an insight into what it actually entails and how you went about doing it.
The first thing it entails is probably being a bit mad in the head, especially if you're going to do it twice in less than 3 weeks. But the actual challenge is to pick a climb, any climb that you want. It can be for any reason, but basically work out how many meters of altitude gain you're gaining per ascent of that climb. And then you work out how many times you would need to do that exact climb to reach the height of Everest, which is 8,848 meters. Then you set about going up and down that same stretch of road until you've completed the required amount of laps. At that stage, you're said to have completed an Everesting challenge.
2 weeks prior to setting the new world record, you actually went out onto Mamore Gap and broke the Irish record and then also finished 5th in the world. We chatted quite a bit about this on the Facebook Live show a few weeks ago, but tell us a little bit about how the preparation went or what you did to get those minutes to tumble the world record.
I'd done it before, and it's one of those challenges when you're going into it. It's so long and it's so tough that you can't really, you certainly can't simulate it in training, and you're it's sort of a best guesstimate as to what you're going to actually do on the day. So although in advance of the first ride, everything that I had calculated beforehand suggested it would be a really good time, I didn't really believe it deep down, just because I didn't even know if it was possible to cycle up Mamore Gap 64 times, which is what I had to do the first time. And then it went so well that although I was quite content with how it went, within a few days, the thoughts started creeping into my head already about I definitely had left a few things on the table and felt that I definitely could have pushed a bit harder. And when I had done 8 hours and 9 minutes, then the kind of thinking is, I wonder could it go below 8 hours? And that was sort of when I started setting about trying to see how fast I actually could go, and spent the next 2.5 weeks sort of keeping the training up and at the same time sort of trying to plan everything to the nth degree and chop everything off my bike that I possibly could. And I actually chopped apart off the segment of Mamore Gap that I was using. So instead of doing the whole way from top to bottom, I sort of cut out the steeper section of Mamore Gap and used that. So it was a shorter segment that I was doing. It was 14% average gradient instead of 11%, so it was steeper. But I did have to do more laps of it. So on the second attempt, I had to do 80 laps of Mamore Gap, climbing that 14% average gradient. So although I had to do more laps, I actually managed to save 35 kilometers off the total distance of the challenge, which is a huge amount when you consider half of that is up Mamore Gap. So you're cutting 17.5 kilometers of climbing out, and I ended up going just over an hour quicker than I did the first time.
And Mamore Gap, of course, is an iconic scenic route in Donegal, but it's also somewhere that's quite close to your heart, isn't it? As a youngster growing up, it was somewhere that you thought you wanted to be able to cycle once, never mind try and against Cyclist for a world record.
Yeah, exactly, and it had that sort of nice aspect to it as well. It actually meant something for me as well. It wasn't just a climb that I was picking because it was purely, almost perfect for Everesting. It actually, as you said, it was a climb that when I first started cycling, I used to cycle over to it, and just try to get up it once was the challenge without having to get off and walk. So I suppose all these years later, it was a nice way to come full circle, I suppose, to go back and do it 64 times without walking the first day, and then 80 times without walking on the second Everesting attempt. So that was definitely a very nice aspect of being able to use a climb so close to home, which just also happened to work out to be almost ideal for Everesting.
What did you do differently with regards to your bike? Because I saw that you had chopped part of your handlebars off with a hacksaw just before you started the challenge. So in the space of the 2 weeks from when you did the very first challenge to when you did the second one, what was different?
I suppose one of the key things is that, the second time I'd done it, I'd already done it the first time. And that might sound obvious, but as I said earlier, going into it the first day, I had no idea was it even possible to cycle up Memorial Gap 64 times. The gradient at the top is, my Garmin was reading 24% or something like that. So that really does take its toll. And having got through it the first day, I was able to go into the second attempt with much more confidence. I was also able to go into the second attempt with much more experience and knowing how to pace myself. And then, with the understanding of what was required as well, everything where I erred on the side of caution for the first attempt and, didn't cut up my handlebars and didn't change too much about the bike, I was able to call upon the experience of the first ride and say, well, I only need 3 gears for Memorial Gap because it is so steep. So, I was able to take off the rest of the gears. I knew I hadn't used the drops for the first attempt, so I put on a different set of handlebars and cut off half of them because I wouldn't be using that. I actually happened to get a lend of a carbon set of wheels, whereas the first time I was using aluminium wheels. The guy Aaron Ellis lent me the wheels the first day, and then another friend, Philip Dagnan, lent me the wheels on the second attempt. So all those changes in isolation, they don't make much difference on their own, but when you combine them all together and then combine them with the fact that I had managed to find a way to shave 35 kilometers off what was required, it really adds up. And, well, as we've seen, it added up to an hour and 5 minutes quicker. So it did.
So what is the official world record time now, Ronan?
7 hours, 4 minutes and 41 seconds.
And that was 23 minutes off Contadora's record, wasn't it?
Yeah, 22:40 or something around that mark. Yeah, 23 minutes, give or take, a little bit either side.
And going into it the second time around, I mean, you obviously had the world record probably as a goal going into it. But did you think that you could smash it with, as much of a gap as you did with 23 minutes? Because that's quite significant.
I've been asked this a few times, and although I've answered it as honestly as I can every time, I think I've answered it differently every time. But I was sitting fifth in the world with the time that I had. So if you reckon you're going to go faster and you're already sitting fifth in the world, I suppose you're always running the risk of breaking a world record. But in advance of the second ride, I had done quite a bit of calculations and quite a few models of the event, and they were all telling me that I was going to break the world record, and actually by quite a bit, as it turned out that I did. But when you consider that it's Alberto Contador and everything that he has done, that it currently holds a record at that time, it's sort of it's very hard to believe, even though my calculations for the first Everesting turned out to be pretty accurate, within 2%, and I actually went 2% quicker than the model said I went, or said I would go. And this time, the same method for calculating my time was telling me that I was going to beat the record by, I think the model had said I was going to do 7 hours and 9 minutes. But still, no, when it is Alberto Contador has the record, I think it was just something in my mind where I couldn't believe that. Although I knew that was possible, what I set out to do was just go as fast as I could, and that was quite an easy objective to set because I had the first ride done. I had the fifth best time in the world. I had the Irish record, and I had nothing to lose. So it just sort of meant that I could go at it, and if it didn't work out, then so be it. Nobody nobody was expecting, not even, as I just said, not even myself was expecting me to break Contador's record. So there was absolutely nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, I would still be fifth best in the world, and no bad thing to have. So
Absolutely, and I've had a good training day for the Donegal Ultra, which we'll come back to in a few minutes. But when you look back at the laps that you were doing, was 62 and a half ascents of Memore Gap, like, was your pace very steady the whole way, or did you, at like 55 or 50, did you say, right, I'm absolutely just going to nail this completely until I collapse over the line and I'm done? Or did you just decide to keep it steady the whole way?
a bit of both, and it was 62 and a half laps for the first Everest. It gets quite confusing when you've done 140 odd laps of Memore Gap. I get a bit confused myself, and actually my memory of it is just doing 3 or 4 laps, so I must have been able to zone out for quite a few of them. But yes and no. The idea is to try and ramp it up a bit towards the end. But what actually ended up happening on both occasions was, in terms of perceived exertion, I was ramping it up. I was going harder. If you asked me how it felt like I was going as hard as I could. But all I was doing was kind of sustaining the times that I had been doing when I was fresher. So it was, the timings for each lap were very, very consistent throughout both attempts, even more consistent on the second attempt than they were in the first. And, although I was putting more and more effort in the longer it went on, in terms of what I could feel, the timings were just pretty much staying the same. Even towards the end, when I was going as hard as I could, you're 7 hours into going up and down Memore Gap X amount of times. You're kind of running on empty at that stage, and going full gas. All you're really achieving is that your time isn't getting slower, rather than going full gas and getting your time faster.
And in terms of your fueling then, Ronan, how did you manage that? Because obviously making it a shorter ascent meant that your descent down to turn around and come back up was much shorter as well. But you also took the bottle cages off your bike to make it lighter. So how did you manage the fueling and recovery between each ascent?
Yeah, good question, and it's something that's got a lot of attention. So it is. But basically, what we did was, it was actually Sean McFadden for a large part on the second attempt there, and you'll know Sean from the Donegal Ultra. Sean was right at the top of the climb, and as I was doing the turn, he was handing me a bottle, and I would take a quick drink out of it and throw it back to him. And if I needed a bar, he handed me a bar. The same thing, if I needed a gel, he handed me a gel. So Sean was there for the full 7 hours and 4 minutes of the Everesting, plus the extra couple of laps, just to be sure that I had enough done. So we were standing on Memore Gap for a good 7.5, 8 hours that day, and no matter what I needed, it was there ready for me every time I got up. Like, so that the pacing, or sorry, the fueling, there was very little for me to think about other than grabbing a bottle and taking a drink. The whole team pretty much had everything ready to go for me. Just the same as Alan Harkins had for me the first time I done the Everesting. All I had to do was consume what they were handing to me. I didn't have to think about it, and that, not having to have that stress, that mental effort to think about, am I eating enough, am I drinking enough, makes a huge difference. They were you couldn't, there's no way to calculate how much time that saved me, having the two guys there, but it must have been huge.
Yeah, Sean, no stranger to long distance himself, the organizer of the Donegal Ultra. But Ronan, this has really put you into the spotlight. If you do a Google now of Ronan Mac and Memore Gap or World Record, and there's like 1 million hits nearly coming up on it. But you're no stranger to the spotlight, because you have been a professional rider prior to coming back to Ireland a couple of years ago. So I'd love to go back and hear, how did you get involved in cycling in the very first place, and what brought you to Belgium to race as a professional athlete?
Well, the sort of $1 million question is, what got me involved in cycling, and nobody in the family is really too sure. I happened to work for my father during school holidays during the summer, when I was younger, and at the end of one of those summers, he asked me, you're going back to work, or you're going back to school now in September. You didn't get paid, or you didn't get pocket money for all the work you done, but what do you want now for all the work you have done over the summer? And for whatever reason, nobody really knows to this day, I said I wanted a road racing bike. I ended up getting a road bike, and I suppose I haven't looked back since then. I just got on the bike, and I still haven't got off it. I'm still pedaling away each and every day, like so. That was sort of how I got involved, and then I started cycling my own a bit, and started off when I came home from school. I used to just there's another quite a steep hill just right above where we used to live, and Granger's Gap it's called, and used to go out, and that was the first sort of challenge I set myself. Straight home from school, straight onto the bike, and see if I can get up to the top of Granger's Gap without having to get off and walk. And it took about half an hour to get from down where we lived right up to the top of this hill, and then you could almost freewheel all the way back down again. And once I'd sort of conquered that, then it sort of turned to, on Saturdays, as we were saying earlier, riding over to Memorial Gap and see if I can get up that. And eventually got the whole way up Memorial Gap without having to walk. And I think about a year or so after that, I heard about a charity cycle from Mizenhead to Mallinhead that sort of perked my interest, and signed up for that and raised money for the Foyle Hospice here locally, and did the Mizenhead to Mallinhead cycle. Fell in with some of the local cyclists who I hadn't known prior to that, but who were all part of a group that weren't really a cycling club. So I joined them, and off we went. And they all set up Foyle Cycling Club, and I joined the club, and they sort of took me under their wings or whatever. And yeah, one thing led to another, and a couple of years later I started racing bikes, and ended up, I think I just went to a race one day and happened to overhear someone saying they were going to Belgium for the summer, and my dad picked me up from the race and says, "Can I go to Belgium for the summer?"
Seriously?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Now, there was a house in Belgium at the time that was specifically for Irish cyclists, so it's not like I just landed off the plane in Brussels and camped out in the woods or whatever. Like there was a house there for us, but I started going over to Belgium around about that time, and that was 2005, and yeah, it just snowballed from there. I've been back. Well, I was back 2005, 2006, 2007, and then 2008 I joined the Am Post Sean Kelly team and spent 6 years in Belgium.
It's incredible to think, the number of young riders that have gone at the elite cycling circuit, really, isn't it? From such a small country, we've had some incredible cyclists, yourself included.
I think in every sport, Ireland tends to punch well above its weight, and that's probably down to the type of athletes that we can produce here in the country, and we all tend to be fairly determined and fairly resilient, and everything is needed to above and beyond the talent that's required for riders to make it internationally. And I got a taste of that sort of international level sport. But there's quite a few other riders who were in the Ampos Sean Kelly team as well, and they've gone on to huge international success. The most famous of those at this stage is probably Sam Bennett, who pretty much everybody knows at this stage is one of the best sprinters in the world. Like so, we in the Ampos team, we had a great as Irish riders, we had a great opportunity. It was a team with an Irish sponsor for the development of Irish riders. It had a nice mixture of international riders in there too, to sort of bring some experience and bring. It wasn't to take the pressure off us as Irish riders, but it effectively did, because there were some pretty big names in the team, and the team was always run very well, and everybody got equal opportunity to sort of get their own chances in races. And it's a shame that team's gone now, but in the time that it existed, it created some fantastic cyclists.
Did you ever get starstruck meeting any of the cyclists that you would have grown up maybe seeing, and then be in the mix with them?
Yes and no. It kind of, I suppose when you first get exposed, you're lining up on the start line, or you're sort of getting warmed up or getting ready for the race beforehand, and you see some of the biggest names in the sport doing the exact same thing, getting warmed up, getting signed on for the same races you're about to ride. There probably was times that could be a bit daunting, but for me, I was always very lucky that as soon as the flag dropped or the race started, I didn't tend to notice who I was riding against. It was more just either I had a job to do in the race for the team, or I was trying to get in the breakaway, or I was just trying to survive and do the best I could. And it didn't really matter who I was racing against. It was that was just someone from another rival team, that I never thought too much about who they were in terms of what they had achieved in the sport, or if they were a big name, or a not so big name, but that's not something that I can claim as a talent or something that I really tried hard not to do. I think it's just something that naturally happened for me, that as soon as the flag dropped, it was a race and they were just another person with two arms and two legs, that they everybody had the same right to be there, so it never played too much. I think the only time I really got, I don't know if starstruck's the right word, but let's use it on way. I think the only time I got starstruck was I happened to get talking to Tom Boonen in a race one day, and he was asking me about the cliffs of Moher and how beautiful they were. He'd just been there on holidays, and I as the only Irishman in the conversation, had to turn around and say that I'd never been to Clifton Moher, which was quite embarrassing. But I'm not sure if I was starstruck or if I was embarrassed. But either way, it was a funny conversation.
And you told him to come and check out the hills of Donegal instead.
Well, it's something to that effect, yeah.
And Ronan, looking back over your career and those races around the world, what would have been the highlight for you of all of that?
Without doubt, representing Ireland at the Elite World Championships in 2012. There's not many people that get that opportunity, and for me, that was it. It wouldn't have mattered what else I went on to do. Just to represent the country and the absolute highest level of international cycling in terms of national teams. But yeah, no questions asked. That has to be the highlight for me anyway, personally.
And then if you look at, say, some low lights or some injuries or crashes that you've had, would there be many of those like low lights of that career, or was it, for the most part, was it you were living your dream, living your passion, pedaling your bike and just enjoying life?
Yeah, there was a few, negative times and a few, definitely a few low lights, and it's that is part of the sport of cycling, and quite often it's when you get to that international level, everybody is talented and the vast majority of people are dedicated. So there's nobody, even the best riders in the world, they're not winning every single race that they do. Even if you're Mark Cavendish in his heyday and he's winning 20 races a year, he's probably still riding another 70 or 80 that you could argue that he is losing because he's not winning them races. But just by the nature of cycling, Cavendish was a sprinter. He won sprint races, but if the next day is an uphill finish, he's probably not going to win that. So you sort of become, in some ways, immune to that feeling of having lost a race, because it's not actually possible to. It's not like football where you can, a team like Liverpool this year. I don't follow football, but I'll try to use some sort of analogy there. They can go so many games unbeaten. It's few and far between that riders can go too far unbeaten in a season of cycling, just because of the different aspects of every race. So from that point of view, you sort of become immune to that. But there was definitely times that you're struggling with injury or you're struggling with form, and you're getting a couple of DNFs in a row, or you maybe combine both injury, lack of form, DNFs, and then you're in a foreign country in March and it's snowing for every race that you do, and those are difficult times. But at the same time, much like all the training and much like trying to watch what you're eating, it never seemed like a sacrifice to me, because I was just very focused on trying to be the best that I could, and I was lucky in that I could see every time I was struggling, the more obvious thing to me was the opportunity that I had rather than the difficulties that I had. So I suppose that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and as I said, I was just very lucky in that I was able to focus on the job at hand. If I wasn't in good form, try to figure out what was going to bring me back into good condition. If I wasn't having a good run in the races, try to figure out what was I doing wrong, what could be improved, sort of refocus for the next race. And as I said all along, we were in an Irish team with an Irish sponsor, living in a house in Belgium that had, most of the occupants of the house were Irish as well. So it was really a home from home for Irish riders. And when you compare that to quite a few of the other Irish riders at the time who had to, when they were starting out, they had to go to France, or they had to go to Italy, or they had to go to Belgium or wherever, and live basically on their own with a foreign family that didn't really know they maybe didn't speak the language, and to me, it just seemed like a great opportunity that we had. So there definitely was times that it would get you down or whatever, but it's just trying to reset the mind on the fact that there's a great opportunity at hand to make the best of yourself that you can. So
since you've come home, then you've kind of taken the domestic scene by storm as well. You were hoping for the triple with the Shea Elliott this year, having won it in 2018 and 2019, but unfortunately the current global situation put a stop to that. And you've done the Donegal Ultra, you're now a world record holder. Was it easy to come home, Ronan, or was it a difficult decision?
I suppose it was one of those difficult decisions that you sort of deep down know is the right thing to do. So at the time, that the way I always approached my racing full time was that so long as I was progressing towards world tour level or getting to the top of the sport, I could justify it. But I always said that the year that I stopped progressing towards that would have to be the year that I stopped. And as we said earlier, the highlight of my career was 2012, going to the World Championships. Pretty much the whole of 2012, I was going very, very well. I was in good condition for the whole year. I had some great performances. But in 2013, just, probably because I just wanted it too much, I trained a huge amount, in the winter from 2012 into 2013. Looking back, I definitely trained too much. I went away from what had worked for me previously and spent the whole winter in Spain and just tried to do too much and ended up overcooking it. And 2013 ended up, I didn't even plateau in 2013. It just went backwards completely. So from that point of view, although at the time that I sort of walked away from the AMPOS team, although there was later the opportunity to go back to the team, and there was also quite a lot of work on trying to find another team, maybe in Britain or America or something like that for a year. I started deep down knew that it was time to call it a day. It was time to leave Never Land and go back to the real world. And it's actually coincidentally just the sort of night that I decided, right, let's quit this search for another team. Let's just get on with the transition back into the real world. Myself and a couple of friends went out for a few drinks just to sort of, I suppose, celebrate or whatever. And that very night I ended up meeting Rachel, who a few years later ended up marrying, and we now have a kid and all. So I didn't dilly-dally too much. Ended up transitioning quite quickly, and it was straight into the end, trying to get a job, and just real life took over, and never had too much time left to think back or to have any regrets or anything like that, which I don't anyway. So, but in all that time, I still love my bike, still love training, still love racing. So I've kept all that up, and there's no sign of me stopping anytime soon.
Ronan, in terms of your training now, like what are you doing now? So you do have the Donegal Ultra. This show will be out before that race takes place at the end of this month of August. But you were on Memorial Gap yesterday. You are doing a bit of training at the moment. I believe you are trying to go for the course record at the Donegal Ultra.
Same thing again. I'm just trying to go around as fast as I can. The thing about all these crazy endurance cycling events and the Everesting and all is that the longer you're out there, the more it tends to hurt. So I would rather hurt more for a shorter time and try and get back quicker. So hopefully that'll work out all right. But yeah, yesterday we had another good spin. Happened to get out with a couple of other lads who are racing the 555 as well. So we went out in a bit of a recce of some of the roads from the 555, and it was nice to get out on them. We happened to end up going up Memorial Gap again, although from the opposite side this time. So it was a nice, it was a bit of a change of scenery, I suppose, going up the opposite side of it compared to what I'd done 140 odd times over the last 3 weeks. So, but yeah, like I obviously, I broke the world record for Everesting. The form is good. The condition is good. The whole Everesting thing has sort of given me, first of all, it gave me a reason to train and keep focused during lockdown. And now it's given me sort of a new lease of life, or whatever you might want to call it. Just although I was always motivated for the 555, having done those 2 mammoth days on the bike, they're obviously going to stand to me as well in terms of form, and just I feel good in general. So it's only 3 weeks away now to the Donegal Ultra, and we'll keep the head down for that time and see how it goes.
And the thing as well, Ronan, is you know those roads most likely like the back of your hand, really, aside from Memorial Gap. But in general, doing a race of the distance of 555k in your own backyard has got to be a bonus.
Yeah, certainly. Like the record is, with any record, it's very much weather dependent. Like if it turns out to be a dreadful day, or very strong headwinds or whatever, it'll probably put it out of sight. But definitely knowing the roads is a huge advantage. Certainly the first half of the 555, I could almost ride it blindfolded. I know the roads that well at this stage. The second half I wouldn't be so familiar with, or probably the third quarter I wouldn't be so familiar with, but definitely the first half and the last quarter, there'll be no surprises there for me. Like, so it'll just be about trying to, again, doing what I enjoy most about these things is sort of problem solving now for the next 3 weeks, working out the race plan, working out the tactic, trying to optimize the bike, optimize the pacing, all those parts of what I did for the Everesting, although they'll be very different for the 555. That's sort of what I enjoy most about bike racing, is all that sort of analytical work, I suppose, before and after, or planning work before and analytical work afterwards. I really enjoy that, and it's another, it'll keep me occupied for the next few weeks in terms of all that preparation work, and then hopefully it doesn't keep me occupied for too long on the day, and it all goes well and we get back in a record time. Then that would be that would be the icing on the cake. But the first goal at hand is to get home, and then the second target is obviously to try and get home first, and if both of those things go well, then we'll be on with a chance of getting the record, I suppose.
And that meticulous planning, Ronan, is crucial to success in an endurance event like that, whether it's the Everesting Challenge or the likes of the Donegal Ultra 555, because you don't want to think when you're on your bike. All you want to do is cycle. So having all those crucial bits and pieces in place before you go gives yourself the best shot of completing it in the fastest possible time, regardless of the weather and the record and all of that, because you nearly have the race done without the actual pedaling before you get to the start line, when you have your logistics in place and your meticulous planning, because making a wrong decision on the road can be detrimental to not only yourself, your crew, and also to your overall race performance.
Exactly, yeah. And the old saying goes, fail to plan to fail. So I'm trying to eliminate as much as possible a chance for something to go wrong. Undoubtedly something will still go wrong, but it's just minimizing the chance of what goes wrong being something serious, and giving myself the best chance possible to try and get through it in the best shape possible.
For people maybe who are listening, Ronan, who would love to step up, I mean, we spoke to Joe Barr about this in the last episode, but who'd love to step up and maybe take on the likes of a challenge of the 555 kilometre race in Donegal, or the race around Ireland, as either a solo or a team, what, other than the meticulous planning and the training, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who may be listening in, who might be somebody who even wants to just step up from doing a 60k sportif to 140k, or maybe go further?
The first thing I would genuinely say is, sort of scratch everything that I've just said. Genuinely, what I was talking about there was, trying to do the best that I can. I've done the 555 twice before, and I've been lucky enough to win it twice before, and for me, the goal is to see how fast can I do it. The goal is not to finish it. I've done that twice before, so that's why all that meticulous planning and all, in terms of the pacing and trying to optimize everything, that's where that comes from. If someone is setting themselves a challenge of whether it be to ride their first 100 kilometers or whether it be to ride the 555. The one thing I would say is start off just by putting your name on, register for the event, or write it down in your diary when you're going to do this first 100k, because committing to something is often the hardest step to take, but also the most important. And On both occasions of the Everesting, I sort of hemmed and hawed, and yes, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I was on, off, and even right up until standing on Memorial Gap for the second Everesting, and it was still pouring rain. But I sort of said, well, there's only one thing we can do here. We're standing on the climb. It is raining, but the forecast says it will dry up, and when it dries up, it's going to be a great day for Everesting. Put my front wheel on the start line and start the challenge. And whatever comes after that comes after it, and you'll deal with it. But if you don't register and you don't sign up and you don't commit to it and you don't then put your front wheel on the start line, you're never going to get to that point of having completed it. And that is the most daunting part of it, is just that, because when you're on the bike doing any event, you're going through the motions of completing the event, so you don't really have that much time to think too much about it. But for that time period before you actually get to the day of the event, you've got so much time to think about it. You've got so much time to convince yourself that I can't do this, or this is too hard, or this can't be done, or whatever it is. But, really, as I said to you in the first show that we did, and I sort of took this philosophy, or whatever you want to call it, into the second Everesting, was that if anybody on their day, if they dedicate themselves and prepare themselves and train for something, anybody can be world class on their day. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And that's what it's all about. Is just put your name on the start sheet, a start list, or whatever it might be. Put it in your diary when you're going to do this first 100 kilometers, or the first time you're going to do 160 kilometers. Do your training in advance of that. I wouldn't get too bogged down in the specifics of training, whatever. Yes, specific training can help. But for the vast majority of people, it's about trying to increase your fitness in whatever way you can. If you want to do your first 160 kilometer ride and you reckon it's going to take 8, 9, 10 hours, that doesn't mean you need to ride for 8, 9, 10 hours, countless times in advance of it. The adrenaline and the excitement of the day will get you through the most of it. All you need to try and do is get yourself as fit as possible, as prepared as possible in advance, and then as I said before, put your front wheel on the start line, and away you go. And people are incredible. The things that we can achieve is just, everybody we talk to can give us some reason why we can't do something, but for a lot of people, they'll find that when they put their mind to it, they can do just about anything they want.
And Ronan, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about your own career, kind of 2012, 2013, you were talking about, overcooking it a bit towards the end there, where you felt you were going backwards. For domestic riders and for the average amateur rider, our athlete, triathlete, whatever it is that we do in endurance sport, we do actually have a habit of maybe overtraining and not listening to our bodies with regards to the training. We want to get that extra session in. We want to do that FTP test. We want to, get the session done, even though we mightn't be up for it. How do we mitigate against that sense of needing to do the training but not overtrain? And obviously, as a coach yourself, you have Panache Coaching, and you're coaching Imogen Cotter and a few other athletes that are doing very, very well, both domestically. Well, I suppose Imogen's in Belgium, but you have domestic riders as well doing very well. How do we pull back from that kind of, is it a want that we want to train, but then we know we shouldn't because we're overtraining? That's a very long-winded question, but I hope you know what I mean.
Well, considering some of the long-winded answers I've given you so far, you were well entitled to the long-winded question at this stage. I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of having a coach. And, the vast majority of people, everybody now you can find online, or you can find books or whatever that will tell us this, that and the other about training, and we can all research and study and come up with training plans that look great on paper. But the real value in having a coach is, first of all, having someone to be accountable to. So a lot of people find value in having a coach planning their training and analysing their training after it's done, and for the athlete knowing that this coach is going to be looking at what I've done, and if they're struggling with motivation, sometimes that helps them stick to a plan, knowing that somebody else is going to be checking, has it been done or not, and has it been done has it been done correctly or near enough correctly. But then the other great value in having a coach is just having someone who can say, you know what, we've done enough this week, you're feeling tired, you you don't need to go out, push the boat out too much or burn the candle at both ends. Missing one day of training is not going to do any harm. Or just having someone to bounce that question off of, do I need to train today? I don't feel up to it. And a good coach should be able to answer that with, well, you've done a very hard week of training. You've also had a stressful week in work from what you're telling me. The baby had you up all last night or whatever it is. It sounds like skipping today is probably the best thing for you. But as is natural for most athletes, we tend to be very determined and resilient people who we sort of forget that we've already done 3 hard sessions this week and that we were awake all last night and that we are under extreme pressure and working. The only thing we can focus on is the fact that we're about to miss a training session or we can't hit a target in an interval. And we just need a coach to turn around and say, well, here, look, this is not the day to be doing this session. Yes, it was part of the plan, but plans are always subject to change. And the way this week has worked out means that you'd be far better off taking a rest day today. So I think that's one of the best aspects of the coaching that I provide, is that I'm sort of there on hand. A lot of the athletes that I coach could almost work out the training plan for themselves. But what I'm doing is sort of, yes, I still write their training plans. They no doubt could do it themselves, but what I'm doing is writing a plan and then they can come back to me and ask questions or offer a change here or a change there that they think may. It's very much a two-way conversation rather than just here, go and do this sort of way of working.
And do you have a coach yourself, Ronan, or do you coach yourself?
I did have a coach myself. I do believe that having a coach, even for someone who is a coach, I think having a coach is much better than being self-coached. What I find tends to happen for myself personally anyway is, although I can write a training plan for an athlete to prepare towards an event that they're working towards, when it comes to myself, what I end up doing is just justifying doing the sessions that I enjoy every day rather than doing what's right. It also means that I don't have the chance to, bounce questions off someone or, ask them, am I being hard on myself or am I being hard on myself for trying to do a session that I clearly am not going to be able to do, or soft for not, if it's the opposite side of that, I'm just looking at the one when it's raining and that's put me off. And that's not a reason to skip training really. There's turbo trainers and there's rain jackets. There's all sorts of options. I did have a coach, but just with the way life was going for me, everything got very, very busy there last year. We had, our daughter here who was just, she's still a toddler, but she was very, very young last year. And it wasn't really, what was ended up happening was, days where I thought I had an hour to train, I ended up having no time to train. And days where I thought I had no time to train, sometimes I was finding time to train. So what I ended up doing was I just felt that I couldn't commit to having a coach and sort of move to self-coaching. But if things settle down again, the first thing I'll be doing is definitely getting myself a coach again. And in the meantime, I sort of have Timmy Barry and Frankie Campbell and a few other people who sort of run our team that I can bounce ideas off and talk to and just work things out through discussion. Although they're not writing training plans for me, they're not coaching me or anything. It's not like I'm on my own either. I've got people to bounce ideas off and have conversations with. It definitely helps.
Brings me really to the next question. You've kind of half answered it, but in terms of balancing that busy household as well, because you wear so many different hats within the cycling world. You're a cyclist, you're a coach, you also sit on the board of Cycling Ireland, you are working with a charity that encourages children to be more active on their bikes, and then you're also involved with Pactimo. So where do you find, and probably 10 other hats as well that we probably don't even know about, but how do you find the time then to train? Do you work it into your daily schedule in that I've an hour here, I can get a hard session done for 45 minutes? Or, is it a case of you get up at an ungodly hour in the morning, or you train when the baby has gone to bed, or how do you work it?
I'm not a big fan of sleeping, so it gives me a few extra hours in the day that most people don't have. Here, when you list them all out like that, it sounds, it sounds ridiculous. I do have my full-time job with Sustrans, and that's 9 to 5. That's what I do during the day. But sort of, luckily, what that job allows me to do, because it is promoting active travel, walking, cycling, or scooting, when we're in a normal year and we don't have a global pandemic, and I'm going out to schools 5 days a week. What that allows me to do is commute by bike. So by commuting by bike to the schools and get my training done on the way out and the way back home again. And then, yes, I'm on the board of Cycling Ireland. It tends to be a board meeting once a month, and they're all done virtually now anyway. And any other meetings outside of that in previous years would have been virtually or on the phone or whatever as well in the evenings. And then my coaching work is just something that I really, really enjoy, and it's more of a hobby than anything else. So combine that with the fact that I'm very lucky to have spent the last 15 years riding my bike. God knows how many of those years I did 25,000 kilometers a year. So I've got an aerobic engine built up that is, so long as I keep ticking over, it's not going to disappear overnight. So I probably can get away with doing less training than most people, which then frees up a bit of time to do these other things that I do enjoy doing.
Aside from the Donegal Ultra, what's the next crazy challenge? Or are you going to keep that in the vault for the moment?
I did a podcast or a YouTube thing a few days ago, and I think I got talked into committing myself to another Everesting on it. I'm afraid to watch it back in case that is what happened. It's certainly the memory I have of it is that there was some sort of deal done that I would do another Everest. The nationals are penciled in now for October time, which I would quite like to sort of turn my focus towards a bit of road racing before the end of the year, so long as obviously public health and the pandemic and everything is the most important thing in this year, and so long as racing does go as far as October and the nationals happen, then I would work towards that. But I have a few other sort of obscure events that I would like to try, but they're all very much subject to finding a sponsor, or they're not. The Everesting isn't too bad because it's just up and down a single hill, but some of the other stuff I'm thinking about, and the likes of the 555 and stuff like that, they work out to be quite costly days on the bike, in terms of getting the bike ready, getting all the nutrition and stuff that you need for the day, getting bits and pieces of spares and stuff, and then putting a car or two on the road to support you for the whole event. They're not cheap to do, but I certainly have a few other targets that are on sort of the so-called cycling bucket list that if I won the lotto tomorrow, I would be lining up to do on well, if I won the lotto on Tuesday, I'd be lining up to do them on Wednesday, put it that way.
You'd be gone.
Yeah, gone.
Gone on the
Gone.
bike,
No,
just gone.
I would come back again, but I would be gone for a while anyway.
As long as it's a green list country, you'll be all right.
Most of it's within, when you well like us in Ireland, sure, where else would you want to go?
Well, this is it. Ronan, if somebody had said to you back when you had gotten that first racer from your dad that summer and said that you would have had such a prolific career, do you think would you have said they were dreaming and joking? And considering how much time you spend on your bike, with your bike, and within the cycling community?
I think if they had told me how much time I spend on my bike, with my bike, and in the cycling community, I might have said, you know what, maybe I better just leave this thing here now before I get started. So if I thought they were right, it might have been just best to walk away there and then.
And as a youngster, what did you want to be when you grew up, other than a professional cyclist, or was it a professional cyclist is what you wanted?
I think I went through all those things as you do when you're very young: fireman, army, I want to be my daddy, want to be all these everything at a young age. But I think sport took over before I really got to the age where I was sort of thinking career wise. But what that meant was that, I tried soccer, I tried football, I tried hurling, I tried cross country running, tried basketball, tried all sorts of athletics. Pretty much, if it was a sport and it was a chance to get out of school for even 30 seconds, my name was on every list going.
And do you know what's quite ironic, Ronan, is now you're going into schools to encourage people to be more mobile on their bikes or their walking or their scooters. It's quite ironic that you're actually going back into school as part of your current career.
Maybe it was a subconscious thing, but I was always wishing for somebody to come and take us out of class, and maybe that's what I'm doing now. I'm coming in and taking the kids out for the cycling. But yeah, like the work I do with Sustrans is just, it never feels like work, and we put it that way. But back in the day when I was in school, it was just anything to do with sport, and then I was lucky enough to find cycling, and once I found cycling and realised I could be sort of good at it, and the thing I really liked about it was that it wasn't like football or basketball or something where you could put in all the hours in the day and it was sort of difficult to gain the skill that you might not have had. I'm very reluctant to say anything's impossible, but just some sports you can be naturally gifted for. But what I really liked about cycling was that the harder you worked, the better it tended to work out for you. But I kept up all those sports until I was about 17 or 18 or so, and I even remember there's actually quite a funny story about I was in school one day, and I think I had played football during the day, went to basketball after school, then got the bus from Buncrana to Derry to go to circuit training class for my cycling in Derry. And then I was getting the bus, and this was like a winter's evening, I was getting the bus from Derry back to my home in Muff. It must have been about 8 o'clock at this stage. I'd done 3 or 4 sports during the day and my whole day in school. What ended up happening was I was sitting down the back of the bus and fell asleep, and ended up waking up, I think it must have been about an hour later, when the bus driver was actually just driving home in the pitch dark night in the middle of the countryside. I was just exhausted from all the sport, and I think now when I woke up, I realised that I had missed my stop and was walking up the bus to sort of tell the bus driver, "Here, you need to let me off. I think you need to put the bus over the hedge. You got that much of a fright." It was just and it's something that I sort of have said ever since, is that you see, especially nowadays, kids getting very specialised in one particular sport at a very young age, and I think that was one of the best things I ever did, was sticking to all those different sports that give me such a sort of varied skill set. What everybody sees about bike racing is pedaling your bike as fast as you can, but there's just so much more to it than that I think that really stood to me. And genuinely, if I had the chance to go back now, I would probably do everything I did exactly the same, but I would pay much more attention in actual school as well, because the amount of time that I've spent since then going back and trying to learn the maths that I didn't learn then, because I wanted to apply it to something about my training or something about preparation for a race. And the algebra that I thought would have been useless when I was in secondary school turns out to be actually quite valuable. And I had actually paid some attention in Spanish. All the time I spent in Spain, I could have maybe actually communicated with people rather than grunting at them, I suppose. So it's funny just looking back. When we're young, we think, what's this? What good is this going to do? But actually, it's incredibly valuable.
Well, Ronan, I've taken up so much of your time. I think there's some wise words to leave us with this evening. And I think you've been very humble in what you've spoken about, because you have had a fantastic career and you will undoubtedly continue to have a great career here at home. I wish you the very, very best of luck with the Donegal Ultra. I can't wait to see what the next obscure challenge, to put in your own words, is going to be. And I hope I'm somewhere at a finish line soon to be able to call you across the line. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed this episode with Ronan. Don't forget, you can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. To hear more in-depth detail of Ronan's first Everesting attempt, pop over to the Try Talking Sport Facebook page and catch up on the live session on the videos tab. I'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. Pop by and say hi and let me know what you think of the show. And if you are new to Try Talking Sport, please do check out some of our previous episodes. You will be impressed and inspired by our guests. Until next time, wash your hands, stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.